Ready.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Panelists, are you ready?
All right.
How about that?
Are we going to start with the video first?
I'm going to talk straight in
Okay. Got it. All right, so I'll start.
Yep.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for having us out-of-towners, fellow Midwesterners, Wisconsin and Illinois, but not Iowans, we must confess. Though there are a lot of Packers fans in Iowa, so I do feel at home and a lot of nice people. It's great to be here in Dysart, and unlike those that come to your city and state to ask for your vote, I'm here to talk about your seeds and what we can do to protect the fruits of your labor from the Chinese Communist Party. I want to thank my friend and colleague Ashley Hinson in particular for your representative for inviting us here today. Her leadership on the committee, both on the China Select Committee and on the Appropriations Committee, is phenomenal. She's someone who fights for America's farmers, but Iowa farmers in particular, and someone who sees the threats to America with a clear eye. And so, Ashley, thank you so much for being here. I want to thank Youngblood Ag for welcoming us. Senator, we have, well, two senators, sorry. But we were reminiscing about the fact that we have a mutual friend in Governor Walker. I took a selfie and then texted it to him. And he immediately responded, and he said the American flag that's behind him on every interview he does is an American flag that you gave him back in 2016 during an event at your house. So further proof that the Wisconsin-Iowa ties are thick and deep. So today we're here, Republicans and Democrats, to talk about what we believe is an American issue. If you go all the way back to 2011, a field manager at a farm here in Iowa spotted an unfamiliar man digging in one of his fields. And when he confronted the stranger, the man claimed to be from a university and then hurriedly excused himself. The field happened to be planted with special seeds from DuPont Pioneer, which then formed the FBI. The subsequent investigation uncovered a Chinese seed smuggling ring, and the man digging in the field, Mo Hai Long, was charged by the Department of Justice and then convicted in federal court in 2016 for assorted crimes. But that was just the beginning. Since then, the FBI has investigated many such cases, and the DOJ has secured additional convictions. So the question we want to talk about today is, why is the Chinese Communist Party after our seeds and our agricultural technology? In my opinion, it's part of a much larger countrywide slow-motion heist of American intellectual property. The FBI has estimated that China steals between $225 to $600 billion worth of American intellectual property and trade secrets every single year. That's every year. It's been called the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. That's around $4,000 stolen per American family of four every year. Our farms are more than just places to grow food. They're research laboratories, they're homes, they're schools, they are strategic national resources. We have a duty to protect all our technology, whether it's in Silicon Valley or in a cornfield here in Iowa. The U.S. technological ecosystem is a bucket that currently has massive holes in the bottom, and we continue to pour billions and billions of R&D dollars into it every year. We need to plug these holes. We could do it with export controls, research security, outbound capital restriction, but for whatever reason, we've chosen not to. It's as though a burglar has robbed your home dozens of times before, told you that he's coming back tonight, and you still leave your front door unlocked and your valuables lying around in plain sight. And who is harmed when the CCP steals American technology? It's not the CEOs, it's not the lobbyists, it's our service members put in danger when the CCP weaponizes stolen technology. It's American farmers. It's ordinary Americans that are harmed. Our country is filled with invisible factories and invisible farms, those that would have been built or planted here if we'd chosen to protect American technology and resources. Both the Trump and Biden administrations have oriented U.S. strategy around competing with the Chinese Communist Party, but we are not competing if we're letting the CCP steal hundreds of billions of dollars from Americans. We're throwing the game from the outset. So just like the farmer in the Iowa field, you're being robbed every day in plain sight by the Chinese Communist Party, and today we're here to discuss how we stop that. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend and ranking member, Raja Krishnamurthy.
Hey, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to all of you. Thank you to Ashley for hosting us, and thank you to Youngblood Ag for having us, and thank you to the panelists who are going to present as well. you know, I'm from Illinois, and the senator, the moment he heard me say that, says, "I'm praying for you." So I understand there's a little rivalry between us in Illinois and Iowa, but we can all agree that the purpose that has brought us here today is very important. And the purpose is very simple, as the chairman eloquently stated, which is how do we prevent the theft of hard-earned intellectual property that you folks have spent years developing here in Iowa and places like Illinois, places like Wisconsin, and indeed all of America. And so I have another story similar to what Mike laid out. In 2017, a gentleman named Haitao Zhang was working at Monsanto. And he worked at Monsanto for about 9 years. And then one day, he bought a one-way ticket to China. Before he departed for O'Hare, which, by the way, is in my district, O'Hare International Airport, he put a secret algorithm, a proprietary piece of software, on an SD card about this size. And then he put that in his pocket. What he didn't know is that employees at his company were suspicious of his activities. They monitored his email traffic, and then they alerted the FBI to what was going on. So when he arrived at O'Hare and he went through the usual checks, an FBI agent was there waiting for him. And they discovered an SD card about this size in his belongings, and then they were able to prosecute the intellectual property theft. But think about all the things that had to happen for that prosecution to actually unfold. And think about all the IP theft that is probably happening without us knowing. And so part of the reason why the chairman and I are here today is to highlight and shine a light on what's going on so that more people are alerted to this illegal activity. And then secondly, to figure out what do we do about this? Because we can't sustain this anymore. We can't have a situation where we're constantly developing secrets and research and doing the hard work of innovating, and then all of a sudden having that getting stolen from us, especially when agricultural exports, especially from your district and others, are so vital to our economy. So with that, I just want to say you are not only feeding America and the world, you're also feeding innovation and you're feeding prosperity. So I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to be here with you, and I yield back.
And now the great Ashley Henson.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our ranking member, Raja, for coming to Iowa. Both of you are welcome. We always say Iowa nice, right? We're very welcoming people, and it's so great to have you as visitors to help us tell this very, very important story here in Tama County. And I want to reiterate, you know, when I ran for Congress, I thought, okay, well, there are 3 areas that I really want to focus on. First being protecting taxpayers. Second being standing up for rural America and making sure we're having a voice. And the third, to protect safety and security for Iowans. And this is an area where I see all 3 of those intersecting, right? Because this theft that we just heard about, it costs taxpayers money. It costs rural Americans money, and it puts our safety and security at risk. So this is of utmost importance to have this conversation about our global food supply, the dangers that this poses to our agricultural industry, the persistent IP theft, and the deceptive trade practices being perpetrated by the CCP. I want to thank our witnesses for coming today. You're going to hear directly from Iowans who have experienced these challenges, who work in the field every single day as we develop the policy solutions to counter the CCP. Their feedback and their expertise are going to be invaluable to making sure we are informed and make the right decisions so that we empower you and we don't get in the way, right? I think that's the most important part, is that we thread that needle and we don't let government get in the way of you being successful. Former U.S. Assistant Attorney General John Demers said, China wants the fruits of America's brainpower to harvest the seeds of its planned economic dominance. I think we can all interpret that quite literally here in Iowa. And as Chairman Gallagher mentioned, Mo Hailong was discovered right here in Tama County, stealing our seeds, and not just any seeds. These were hybrid seeds products of millions and millions of dollars of research and development of DuPont Pioneer and Monsanto seed, now Corteva and Bayer. So these high-tech seeds are among the most tightly guarded trade secrets in the industry. The Chinese Communist Party has these right in their targets. Mo's employer, the DBN Group, a Chinese ag conglomerate, was behind all of that operation. Stealing these parent seeds, I see as really stealing from every single Iowa farmer who paid for that research, who buys those products, and then puts them into their fields to try to get the best harvest and then pass on that best deal to Iowans and Americans. According to federal prosecutors, Chinese Communist Party officials made it very clear there was a serious need for a national hero to steal this know-how for China's benefit. And I think we have to be clear-eyed about this. There is no such thing as a private company in China anymore. If they want to do business here, every company in China is regarded as a potential next national hero for the Chinese Communist Party as a means to their end goal of overtaking the U.S. As the world's preeminent superpower. And again, they are doing that right on the backs of American innovators every single day and American farmers every single day. So let me close, and we have an informational video we're going to show in just a second, but I think it goes without saying that our land here in Iowa is sacred, and I'm pleased to have my partners here from Illinois and Wisconsin, because when you look at the heartland, this breadbasket truly does feed and fuel the world, and our land is sacred, and we cannot allow the CCP to continue to steal this intellectual property, buy up our farmland, and rip off our farmers and our manufacturers. We're talking about our most sacred and finite resource, and that's our land and the food that we are able to put on the tables. Why would we let our most serious adversary have the upper hand? Why would we let the CCP continue to take advantage of our farmers and manufacturers? So it's very clear by being here, we are not content with sitting idly by anymore. The status quo is simply too dangerous to maintain. So I look forward to our conversation today with our panelists and my colleagues and working together to continue to stand up for American farmers and protect our national security. And with that, I'd like to have us show a quick video that I think adds some great context to our conversation here today.
In the spring of 2011, an unidentified Asian man is caught by a farmer digging in a grower's field outside Des Moines, Iowa. The FBI identifies the culprit as Dr. Mo Heilong of Boca Raton, Florida, who works for DBN Technology Group in China.
DBN is the largest ag company in China. We found out that China had in their 5-year plan that it was a priority for them to grow in their corn industry, and particularly in the genetic modified corn industry. So what we're seeing here is potentially foreign agents of a foreign power.
Dr. Mo Heilong is arrested for theft of trade secrets after DNA results confirm the corn he illegally purchased and intended to ship to China was indeed the specialized inbred corn. Mo pleaded guilty and received a 3-year prison sentence. There were 5 other indictments, including employees of Corteva and Bayer.
The thing I tell everyone this, if China worked this hard to steal a corn seed, how hard would they work to steal what you produce?
I think that puts it in perspective for everyone, right? And that's why hearing from our panelists is so important today. Iowans who are going to give that great context. So I want to start by introducing Lori, Will, and Suzanne. Thank you so much for being here to share your story with my colleagues and with everybody watching today. Lori, and if you guys would just give a little brief introduction about yourselves and just add a little context for the conversation today, that would be great. So Lori, we'll start with you.
I'm Lori Lang. I'm filling in for Lance Lillibridge, who had an accident and had surgery. Oh, no. And when he called and asked for a favor, I said yes before I found out what it was. And I thought he needed help baling hay or doing chores, and didn't realize it would be a public speaking event. So I will do the best I can and know that Lance owes me. I went to Iowa State, got a degree in agricultural education. And I farm with my brother about 20 miles southwest of here, on a row crop farm.
Okay, Will?
Excuse me. My name is Will Cornelius. I'm the vice president of Cornelius Seed. It's our family-owned business based out of Bellevue, Iowa, about 2 hours east of here, not too far from Illinois. Today I was asked to be here as a representative of the seed industry, and specifically the independent seed industry, small family-owned businesses such as ourselves. There's many of them across Iowa and Wisconsin and Illinois. Cornelius Seed's an independent, family-owned business, started in 1935 by my great-grandfather and his father. So my brother and I have the opportunity to be the 5th generation to be involved in our family business. We market primarily in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois, so that works out very well. Primarily selling corn and soybean seeds. And then on the other side of our business, we farm too. We're blessed to be in the hills of eastern Iowa, so where we can't grow row crops, we grow cattle. We've got a 300 head cow-calf operation. We grow corn, soybeans, and hay to feed the cattle. And as far as my specific role, I wear many hats, as we all do in small family businesses, you know, whether it's actually doing the chores or helping get the seed production done. My primary role in the business is the soybean side of things, selecting our hybrid or our soybean lineup and doing the production planning for that. Certainly no expert on China, but happy to provide an insight from the farmer's perspective of Iowa as well as the seed industry perspective. So thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Will. Suzanne?
Well, you guys didn't take your full 5 minutes, so I'm going to. Good afternoon.
You have a future in Congress.
My name's Suzanne Sherbrun, and I'm a proud Iowan and a 6th-generation farmer. My husband Joe and I raise soybeans, corn, and 3 sons near Farmersburg, 4 miles from the Mississippi River, right across from Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. So we also run a Pioneer Seed dealership for area farmers looking for seed recommendations and agronomic support. And thank you, Chairman Gallagher and Ranking Member Christian Morty, for traveling to Iowa and hearing directly from farmers on the challenges that we are facing. And Representative Hinson, thank you for the seat at today's table and the opportunity to share my perspective. I appreciate that. As we consider our relationship with China in the context of food and agriculture, we must do so strategically with firm understanding of our country's national and agricultural interests. Soybean farmers started building a relationship with China and a soybean market over 40 years ago. So we understand and we're well aware of the time and financial commitment it takes to build a new market. Since then, China has become the largest importer of soybeans in the world and the top export market for the US soy at almost 30 million metric tons per year. That means 1 out of every 3 rows of soybeans you saw as you were driving here goes to China. So while there is little doubt that China has targeted the United States intellectual property and engaged in unfair trade practices, let's proceed cautiously, please, as there is not another market that can completely replace the Chinese market for the American soybean farmer. So how should we combat unfair trade practices and manage the relationship? I ask that you do it fairly but firmly. Theft of intellectual properties and the use of unfair trade practices are unacceptable. Such acts should not be tolerated and should be contested. We need to be deliberate and thoughtful, please. While some suggest that the U.S. revoke China's permanent most favored nation status, the move would decimate agriculture, exports, and could deal a great blow to the American farmer. Instead, we need to diversify our export markets to other countries, especially in Southeast Asia, a region of the world that's quite promising. And increasing food and agricultural exports to other countries also boosts our farm economy and lessens our dependence on China as a buyer of our products and lessens their global influence as well. So I do have 5 points I'd like to run past you, please. As we turn talking points into action, here are a handful of steps to consider. 1, we should support targeted export controls of sensitive technologies that safeguard U.S. innovation and national security and help farmers and the agricultural industry protect critical data, information, and intellectual properties. 2, let's work to reduce retaliatory tariffs on U.S. soybeans, broaden the tariff exclusion process, and prioritize progress on outstanding structural challenges in China. This will improve the operating environment for U.S. businesses and farmers and ensure American goods and services are fairly treated. And at this point, we still have a 25% tariff on soybeans going into China. While the Phase 1 agreement required China to reform its biotech approval process, enforcement of noticeably absent. We must insist China make real progress in establishing a more predictable, timely, and transparent approval process. With over a decade having passed since the U.S. entered into the first free trade agreement, we should build upon efforts to improve U.S. ties with other key trading partners with shared interest. And finally, number 5, the expansion of the Farm Bill promotion programs like the Market Access Program, as well as the Foreign Market Development Program, will do just that by helping strengthen our relationships that will grow and diversify our agricultural markets. In closing, I ask members of the Select Committee to be mindful of the importance of our agriculture and economic relationship with China. With the outlook of U.S.-China relations unclear and our biggest competitors like Brazil and Argentina producing record crops, farmers are supportive of the U.S. government finding a long-term solution for these outstanding issues. Standing on the sidelines of international trade is eroding our global leadership, our long-term economic strength. Without fair, firm, thoughtful, and deliberate action, the challenges facing us not only threaten my generation to carry on the family farm, but my son's opportunity to carry on to be the 7th generation. So thank you for being here today.
Well, I think Suzanne's comment about being careful about navigating, threading that needle, so to speak, about making sure we're holding them accountable, but still being able to have the access to that market. My first question would really be, and any of you can answer and maybe expand on this a little bit, how have you seen trade relations develop since you referenced like the last few decades of trade relations with China and the increase obviously for corn, soybean, everything we're selling to them. How have you seen that relationship evolve? And do you feel like there's a noticeable cooling in the last several years in terms of your access to those markets?
Sure. The U.S. has formerly been trading soybeans with China since 1982. And like I mentioned, they are our #1 importer. The exports to China have grown 34% in the last decade alone. So we need them. It has enabled China to also become the world's top importer of food, as pork, poultry, aquaculture, edible oils, and soy foods. Nearly 1 billion soy consumers reside in China, and this number continues to grow. It boasts the growing middle class that has continued to improve, diversify its diet, and has increased its animal protein appetite. So global demand has increased 264% since 1990, and due in part to our soybean organizations and our international programs that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So, Suzanne, I really take your point about A, being thoughtful and strong as we proceed, but B, looking for other markets that we can get farmers access to. For anybody on the panel, what you mentioned Southeast Asia, but where's the low hanging fruit? I've said repeatedly that we just don't have a proactive trade agenda right now. The politics of trade are tricky in both parties right now, but how do we revitalize that? If we don't think there's a big multilateral agreement in the offing, are there bilateral agreements that would benefit Midwestern farmers without compromising any jobs in America?
I had the opportunity to travel to Cambodia in February and visited with aquaculture farmers, actually snakehead fish farmers of all things. But the United Soybean Board, as well as the Iowa Soybean Association, we've invested dollars into helping teach Cambodian farmers not only how to efficiently grow their fish, but also how to market them. We're helping them make business plans, farm plans. How do you get your fish from point A to point B, your final ending market? So they are excited. It's a young population. They're ready to go. So that's an example. Vietnam is another prime opportunity there as well. And I had the opportunity to go to Myanmar a few years ago, just before COVID. And there again, if they're excited to buy U.S. soy.
Yeah.
You know, they see our quality compared to Brazilian soybean meal. And it's amazing. You can see, literally see it just holding it in your hands. So these countries want to buy from us. We have to make it so they can, and it's affordable for them.
Any other thoughts from the panel? Opportunities?
As far as specific countries, I wouldn't know, but obviously if we look at the world population, Southeast Asia's, you know, there's enough countries there where we can have multilateral agreements with multiple countries there. So I think Suzanne's right on the money.
Great.
Raja, do you have
Well, I was going to say, while you were talking, I was reading, and one of the most interesting things is that Chairman Xi actually visited Iowa on his first trip back in 1985. And so he's very familiar with Iowa, and he says he and Terry Branstad became quote unquote old friends, and he visited Muscatine, Iowa back in 2012 when he became the chairman. I guess what I'm trying to get at is they obviously have a focus on Iowa. They know Iowa is kind of part of an integral part of our bread basket, so to speak. I was wondering, like, what are the dynamics like when you're dealing with Chinese buyers? How has that shaped, evolved over time? What is it like dealing with them? Taking the politics all out of this, okay? Is it easy to deal with them? Are they voracious for all the soybeans you can send to them? If politicians got out of the way, what would happen?
I mean, as Suzanne said, the quality speaks for itself. U.S. soybeans are the best in the world.
Why is that? What's special about them?
Well, I might defer to you more specifically, but essentially, I mean, the quality controls we put into our seed here. I mean, and speaking from a seed perspective, the amount of cleaning we do, the American farmers, you look at these giant combines here, and that's what they do. They clean the seed, they make it so it's high quality. I hear often how there's seed that comes from other countries or other places, and there's all kinds of stuff in it. We don't have that. Our grain is clean here, which is part of what makes it high quality. And I don't know if you would.
Can I just ask you a quick question? When you say clean, I'm sorry, I'm just
No.
trying to get some clarity. When you say it's a clean seed, does that mean basically it's easier to grow? Like when you plant it into the soil, it's...
Yeah, that would certainly be part of it. I guess when I refer to clean seed, and forgive me for not being more detailed. So a combine like this, it takes in the whole soybean plant, and there's stems and pods and dust and dirt. And the whole point of that machine is to clean out those non-desirable pieces. They spit them out the back and they go back in the soil. So when I refer to clean seed, it means that you're getting the soybeans. You're not getting a bunch of stems and pods and non-essential things. You're getting the protein and the oil in that seed, and you're not getting a bunch of stuff that's, not very useful. I mean, would either of you care to elaborate on that? Or?
And that's what they want. The Chinese want that more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, they're buying the soybeans. They're not buying the stubble. They're not buying the pods. They want the protein and the oil that comes in that seed, is what I would say.
They want quality, but they also want a fair price.
Can I ask a question about how, I mean, we talk about the seed innovation and how important that is in increasing yield and making it so that our products are not only are we getting the more high quality product out of the ground, but it's hardier, right? It's going to withstand conditions where we might not have enough rain or where we might have more pests than usual, right? So we have taken the time and spent the R&D to innovate in that space. Do you think that the Chinese are cognizant? I mean, obviously we talked about the seed theft here, but do you think they're cognizant of that role of innovation in the final product? Is that why they're trying to steal it?
I would certainly say that's a big part of it. I mean, the reason we have become the world leader in ag technology and production, not only are we blessed with amazing soils here, we have the technology and the skill set to back it up. We have 6th generation farms, soon to be 7th generation. The amount of knowledge that we have accrued over the years in the farming, community, let alone the advancements that we've been able to get through our market leaders, the trade providers, the chem providers, the precision ag providers. That's what really helps us be the best in the world. sorry, I got a little off. Was that answering kind of your question?
Well, and I think that speaks to, again, why they were targeting stealing it in the first place.
Yes.
But then, when you look at what they're facing, and we've talked a lot about this on our committee, China is facing kind of a population crisis. They cannot feed their own people. They don't have the infrastructure currently set up to do that. Raja mentioned when Xi Jinping came to Iowa to visit a farm in Muscatine, they actually copied and pasted that very farm into China. Sure. Because they literally were so impressed by our American agriculture that they wanted to copy it. So they built down to the farmhouse an exact copy of that farm here in Iowa in China. So it goes without saying that not only do they want to copy us, if they can't buy it, they're going to steal it. Because they are facing this existential crisis in essence, because they can't feed their own people. So I think that's where, when it comes into us making sure we can continue to have fair market access, innovation is a part of us continuing to be able to churn out the products that are better than everywhere else in the world, which will put us again at a higher competitive advantage.
Right. And back to your point, the amount of genetic gain we've had over the last 40 years since he first came here and saw, we've significantly improved on that. I mean, you talk about farmers that went through the drought of '88 and didn't have a crop, and we went through the drought of 2012 and we were amazed what our genetic gain had done for us in that amount of time, because people were shocked with the kind of yields we got. And it's those kind of technologies and experience that they want to gain from us, because they don't have the best soils in the world in China, or if they do, it's in a very small area. They've got more marginal soils where they need those, where they have those more droughty soils, those more stressy environments. And they're saying, what American technology is going to help us improve our yields on those acres?
When we did the 301 tariffs about 5-6 years ago, what I heard from Wisconsin farmers, by the way, very disorienting to be on a farm and not see cows or smell cows, because that's all I know in Northeast Wisconsin. We have more cows than people in a lot of counties that I represent. But I'm getting used to it. So
we can take you to a cattle farm later if you want, Mike.
That just would help me.
One right down the road.
At home.
That's a moving comment.
There we go.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Well done. Now I've lost my train. Oh, the sentiment from farmers in my district was, okay, economically this is not great in terms of my bottom line, but I understand, we're going to have to endure some short-term pain to rebalance our economic relationship with China over the long term. Quite honestly, I heard just as many complaints about the 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, because a lot of that goes into vehicles and parts and things you need to operate a farm. Just give me the unvarnished view from an Iowa farmer on the 301, 232 tariffs. You mentioned reciprocal tariff reduction. I forget the phrase you used, Suzanne. How should we think about that going forward?
You want to say something? No, you go ahead.
I think to your point, what you heard from your farmers is what farmers are saying around here. Let's do some short-term pain for long-term gain. That's for sure. Let's not, and back to Suzanne's point, let's think about the unintended consequences of legislation, and back to Ashley's point as well. How do we kind of work together to find a happy medium here without doing too much damage? I don't know if you want to expand on that.
That's exactly right. Prior to the trade war or tariff war, we were 35% of our soybeans going to China. During that, in 2018, we dropped down to 12.5% of our soybeans going to China. You cannot handle that as a farmer on narrow, thin margins. Now we're back up to that point. But okay, so that was in 2018 and we're 23, so that's 5 years it took us to get back to that point. So like Will said, we thought, early on, short pain for gain, and we need to see that more now.
It should be noted that correct me if I'm wrong, under the terms of the Phase 1 trade deal that the Trump administration struck with China, they pledged to increase their purchases of U.S. exports by about $200 billion. That didn't happen. That was like so many CCP promises, an empty promise. And as a consequence, I think a lot of farmers are suffering.
Well, can I ask a question about just top of my mind, a couple of things I want to just ask you. So we are not presidential candidates, but I suspect that you might
make a big announcement right here, Raj. Although, wait, Democrats don't do Iowa first anymore.
Well, we have a president
Yeah,
already.
that's right, yeah.
We don't
Big
need to
news.
elect another Democrat.
Spice this up.
So, if you had the Republican presidential candidates here, what's the number one thing that you would ask them to do? And I'm sure you've already talked to them. Probably you've talked to several of them at this point, but is there something that maybe we are not familiar with that maybe you've asked them to consider if they become president, or President Biden, whoever? The second is ethanol. I just wanted to ask about ethanol briefly, and your thoughts about how does ethanol play into this relationship with China? If you could address those two things.
Lori, go ahead. You're ethanol.
We could probably get one of the. There's probably a few of them wandering around the street down there. We could probably bring them in and ask them directly. Yeah.
Where's Mike Pence?
Yeah. Mike Pence.
First, if I could circle back to your original question earlier, one thing we didn't mention, we talked about planting the quality seed and the biotechnology and intellectual property that goes into having that quality seed. I think soybeans are about 2% more higher in protein value just than the Chinese soybean seed.
2%?
I think so.
Okay.
That would need to be fact checked. But the other thing is, and we mentioned this combine, but we have access to very efficient equipment. It does a lot of things. I mean, more efficient than, it's mind-boggling, and most people don't even recognize the cleaning power of that. He mentioned clean seed, but it starts from the bag, and then also we need clean seed to go into these corn bins, because the other part of the equation is we know how to store the grain such that it stays in good quality. And I think that that's what some underdeveloped nations really fall on, is that end piece that's not thought about. But how do you keep that grain in good condition? And it has to be clean, it has to be dry, it has to be stored appropriately. And the American farmer is very good at that.
How important is biosecurity to the future of the agriculture industry? And when you look at, malign actors and what they may choose to do, obviously we talk about our food supply and protecting that. But our supply chain could be incredibly vulnerable if there was some sort of a researched and developed bio attack on our food supply. Do you think about that? Does that keep you up at night? And maybe, Will, you can talk a little bit about the advancements in seed that could help prevent and protect against something like that.
It's terrifying. I mean, and yes, I've had some nightmares about such situations. To tell a side story real quick, I mean, back in the 70s in the seed industry, there was a technology that came in that helped sterilize seed corn, so you didn't have to detassel it. But then it restored it, so when it went to the farmers, you still had the pollen and the silk, and you could still make an ear of corn. But you didn't have to go that extra labor of putting people through the field to remove the tassels in corn production. Because that technology was so successful, the genetic pool got so pushed into that cytoplasm, and then a blight came in and just decimated the industry. And that wasn't on purpose. It just happened, So we've seen a precedent of something like that really affecting the industry and destroying yields. And very quickly, the industry got away from it. I think the key is genetic diversity, and not allowing the cytoplasm and the technology to be in the hands of just a few big players, and it all gets whittled down. Encouraging other companies, well, we could go into a whole lot of things here, but essentially encouraging more research and development from smaller independent companies as well. We talk about GM and how expensive it is and how much time it takes to get to market. Gene editing, the newer technology we're using now, is a little more cost effective and allows more players to get into it. The regulation's not as long. So there's a lot more opportunity to spread our diversity. So if we did have something come in, we could hopefully adapt and move pretty quickly. I think the other way you learn and protect yourselves from things like that is investment in land-grant universities, extension programs who are out there doing the research and saying, what are these new diseases or new pests that could be coming to hurt us, and what do we do about it? I mean, for example, right now, soybean gall midge is moving across to Iowa slowly, a few counties every year, and we're not really sure how to deal with it yet. The extension programs, the Iowa Soybean Association is working really hard to figure it out, but it's things like that we need a diverse portfolio of products to be able to say, well, maybe there's certain varieties that are more resistant to that pest or this disease. So I think just to encompass that, to protect from that, having not all our eggs in one basket, but funding multiple different avenues of research and development.
Well, and that goes beyond just obviously what we're putting in our fields. It's our animals too, right? When you think about Iowa's pork producing industry, you may have more cows than people in Wisconsin. We definitely have more pigs than people in Iowa. And you know, we grow the best pork in the country and in the world. And you think about African swine fever, it actually decimated China a few years ago and decimated their pork supply. Avian influenza, we saw what that did to our poultry industry. Iowa obviously produces millions and millions of eggs. I was just at a Cargill facility earlier this week, and they go through 5 million eggs a day to produce, you know, those little egg patties that we all eat on our breakfast sandwiches. So you think about the true impact of protecting biosecurity and continuing to innovate in that space. I think that's one way where we talk about being competitive with China, right? That's the goal of our committee, is how can we continue to support American innovation and be competitive? I think that's one place where solidifying, covering our bases, and making sure we're ready for the next thing is part of that innovation.
Can I ask a question? It may be a little bit of a distraction, but I think it gets to the core of our competitiveness. And if you think about, I mean, what is ultimately our competitive advantage relative to China? I mean, I would say it's our free society, right? If we compete with China on top down versus top down, we will lose. Our strength is bottom up. It's just, you know, Americans innovating, working hard, and figuring things out. That's sort of the American idea. One thing that worries me, at least as I talk to not just farmers, but businesses in my district in Northeast Wisconsin. Actually, well, I'll talk to most businesses that have been started in Northeast Wisconsin, and almost without fail, when I ask them the story of how it got started, the first thing they'll say, you know, the first thing they'll say to me about their background? Take a guess.
I used to
in
farm.
Iowa?
I grew up on a farm.
Okay.
I grew up working on a farm, and you know, as a result, in Illinois, yeah, that's right. And I fled Illinois.
Friendly fire.
But it's the farm work ethic, right? It's you get up early every day, you bust your butt, and you figure it out. But increasingly, I wonder if the educational system is producing that. We've seen farm consolidation in my district. I'm not sure ag is as attractive to that young Wisconsinite as it once was. How do we change that? What does our educational system need to do to be part of this, winning this competition and preserving that competitive advantage relative to China?
Well, I believe Iowa is looking at making sure that we have an agricultural program in every school in the state eventually. But am I saying that correctly, Senator Sumbach? Yes.
Ask the senators.
So, you know, we are, I don't know how many generations removed from the farm now. And the vast majority of the people in the state of Iowa live in a rural community or in a city. They don't understand what's happening out on the farm. If we have the opportunity to expose them to agriculture, and it doesn't just have to be production agriculture, but in the school system, that will broaden their opportunities and horizons there. It doesn't need to be how to plant a soybean. It could be horticulture, aquaculture. I had the opportunity to travel to Chile on a trade mission about a month ago. And, you know, Chile, a mountainous country, they're the second largest producer of salmon in the world. And they want to buy U.S. soybeans, by the way, if we can get the price down there. So I don't know if they have a free trade, but that's one there too. So, but it's the opportunities that they do not know it exists, and they don't know what they don't know. So it's our responsibility as citizens to make sure that we are getting agriculture into the school system one way or another. And it used to be one of the largest FFA chapters was in Chicago. And how many dairy farmers or soybean farmers do you know in Chicago? So, you know, the opportunities are there.
I think she's right. Getting ag in front of schools and funding programs like FFA, like 4-H, opportunities for kids to get exposed to rural things. And it doesn't have to be all ag either. Those are foundational groups that just give you the skill sets to be competitive and learn new things and try new things. So, and speaking from a guy who's trying to raise a bunch of money to build an extension building for the 4-H program, we need money. I mean, we're strapping together and having to consolidate all the time in those type of programs. So any federal help we could get would be very well used, and I think would serve the youth and helping them learn more.
I also think, I mean, showing kids that, you know, ag nowadays, it's not, you know, in Wisconsin, it's no longer a mom and pop 50 cow dairy. It's a highly technologically advanced enterprise. I mean, we're seeing robotics being used, particularly in a lot of our more innovative farms, drones, doing all sorts of things in terms of surveying fields, sampling soil health. And I think that's really, really attractive to the younger generation as well.
And NASA, we have a great astronaut from right here in Iowa, from Cedar Falls, Raja Chari. He just commanded a mission to the International Space Station just a few years ago. And yeah, Raja, great name. Yeah. But he was just actually here talking a few weeks ago with us. We did a panel in Grinnell about the work that NASA is doing to help support agriculture as well, because they can look at things from space. Literally, they can have a different view, an out of this world view of Iowa agriculture, to put it mildly. But they can tell where water's going. They can tell how we can continue to innovate with precision agriculture. So when you talk about that public-private partnership, that's where I see that kind of innovation really helping to support the farmer, while at the same time letting you do what you do best, which is, you know, your land. You know, literally down to the GPS mapping of your land, using that amazing tech that's been developed over many, many years. And I think we need to do everything we can to support both sides of that. That takes me to my next question, which is about, you know, protecting that innovation. What are you doing, either in your industries or as organizations, to have conversations with your colleagues about protection? Do you have trainings or classes to make sure that you're protecting your computer systems? Because obviously those can be vulnerable to hacking, especially our small businesses. What are you doing to make sure that you're protecting your own innovation and your own businesses? Will?
You know, I gave that question a lot of thought on the way over here, because I mean, the shorter answer is we're not doing a lot from my perspective. I mean, granted, small family business, we're not generating a lot of IP. I mean, obviously the corporate companies generating the traits and the chemistries and stuff do, but, and I'm out of my depth here, but, you know, just, I think it's a lot of education, just understanding what's at risk and what we can do about it. Because most general people still are trying to understand the cloud, let alone intellectual property, what can be disappear. I mean, the amount of, I learned a lot in just the opening statements here on what was actually potentially going on. People don't know that, you know, and I think it comes down, if you see something, say something, which goes back to the initial thing that started this whole thing. They saw a couple guys digging up seeds in a field, and oddly enough, I learned just the other day that one of our employees was part of that team that found those guys 10 years ago. It's just, if you see something out of place, say something and speak up.
Can I go back to the ethanol issue? How does that play into the relationship with China? Is that something that they're trying to get into as well? Or do we know? And can you just give me your thoughts on ethanol?
I know they have built ethanol plants. I'm not qualified to speak on that. They also have the bio, where it's not grain ethanol, but biomass ethanol also. I don't know how successful they are. I can't speak to that.
So kind of where I took that question, and I was thinking about that too, because one of the neat opportunities with soybeans is the biofuel potential that's coming. I mean, there's talk that we may be a net importer of soybeans in the Midwest if all this biofuel takes off like they think it could, which that's what ethanol did for corn. It provided an alternative market. We didn't have to rely on export markets. We were able to use it domestically, which then of course reduced our need for foreign oil as well. You know, so it all works together. So if we can help fund alternative uses than just sending our soybeans over the ocean to go to other people, which is not a bad thing because you got to feed the world somehow too. But if we can keep more of this home and help add value to our own value chain here and replace things that we have to import, I think ethanol did that, and biofuels are a way to do that with soybeans as well. And you could probably speak more to that.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Will said here. Biofuels are a great opportunity. It's exciting to be a soybean farmer right now just because of renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. Those are great opportunities for our farmers across the Midwest who are producing soybeans or corn for that matter. But it's also national security. we don't have to look elsewhere for as much oil. You know, we have it here in the United States. We can keep it here, and we're adding value to our products as well. You know, I'd much rather keep our dollars here as much as possible.
My perception, though my grandpa had a farm, but I'm not a farmer, and I've never been a farmer that has done business in China. But my perception is that our relationship is non-reciprocal. So for Chinese businesses or entities in general that want to get access to the American market, do business here, we're pretty wide open. I mean, we've had some reform of the CFIUS process. We're starting to pay attention to things like suspicious land purchases. The Smithfield purchase by a big Chinese entity got a lot of attention and called into question the robustness of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. But if you're an American trying to do business in China, you faced a host of obstacles. It is certainly not as wide open as it is here. I don't know if any of you could speak to that non-reciprocal relationship. Anyone you do business with that has done business in China, the obstacles they face there, because I think as a matter of principle, what most people agree on is that we should operate from the principle of reciprocity. There should be a level playing field. And so if they're going to impose restrictions on us, we can do the same to them. That's just a matter of fairness that I think your average American understands. Does that make sense?
It makes perfectly good sense. We need to have a fair level playing field, but beyond that, I cannot speak on that.
Fair enough.
I would agree. I don't do business directly with China. I think you might be better suited to talk to the American Grains Council or something like that, or American Seed Trade Association, who does deal with more of that. I think those are some excellent resources that could give you some more answers to those type of questions.
I'll plant the seed today and get an answer. Boom. Got you there. Yeah.
I have a quick follow-up because Suzanne, you gave us kind of a to-do list, right? You gave us your top 5, and I would just pose a question because the one that really struck me, since we've had a lot of conversations about the potential trade markets here today. How have you utilized market access programs and kind of the programs that exist within the federal government to help reach those markets? And what barriers exist within those programs? Can we make it easier for not only to access them, but to use them?
I'll go ahead. I already kind of alluded to it in Cambodia, the American Soybean Association, as well as the United Soybean Board, and then states associations like Iowa. We invest in a program called WISH, which is the World Initiative for Soy in Human Health. But it's gone beyond just having people eat or use soy for human consumption. Now we're to the point where we're going into different countries that show potential to teach them, or I should say, help them learn how to efficiently grow their products and then market their products as well, with the intention of getting in there and bringing them on as an importer of U.S. soybeans. I spent 10 days there in Cambodia visiting with researchers in the universities and farmers out in the field, walking up their ponds. I refused to walk in one, but I right up to the edge there with them to look at their fish and stuff, and they're excited. They want to do business with the U.S. So I do not administer those programs from the side of the soybean associations. However, I see the vast benefit we are getting from this. It's amazing. We need to do more of it, and that's how it's how we can get away from the amount of stronghold China has on us in our markets.
Well, and it can counter misinformation too. I think that's an important element here. We spent a lot of time talking about the relationship with Taiwan as well, and Taiwan dealt very recently with a lot of Chinese misinformation about American pork products, and what we don't want is for that misinformation to spread, that propaganda to spread, because ultimately that makes us less competitive and erodes the trust in American produced, whether it's pork, soybeans, corn, or any agricultural commodity that we want to sell in those regions. That's very important.
And the more we're over there communicating with them in their countries, they grow to trust us more. They enjoy being around us. They are learning. You know, it's a good way to start a good relationship down the road.
Okay. Do we want to do audience or press questions, or what's
Does anybody in the audience have a question, I guess?
senators?
Senators?
You want to grill us?
No.
Turn the tables on the feds here? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Suzanne, you mentioned Vietnam. I went there a couple of years ago. I was blown away by having never been before. I mean, just think about our history, but they have such a positive view of Americans. I happened to go there when John McCain was still alive. He gave us a tour of the Hanoi Hilton. It was one of the more powerful experiences of my life. And everywhere he went, he was mobbed as like a rock star. It was wild. But Vietnam, you mentioned Chile. I agree. I mean, we got to be in the business of opening foreign markets. Quick thought. Yeah.
I think the answer is they cannot copy and paste the land.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And they've probably thought about that, Ashley. But I think you can copy and paste a house, you can copy and paste, you know, a lot of things, but there are certain things that are intrinsic, right? And the most fascinating thing to me as I was just sitting listening to all of you talk is for 40 years or more, they have been, you know, importing, you know, millions and millions and millions of tons of soy and corn and other exports. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. In every other industry, they have basically taken whatever has been imported, copied it, rearranged it, and then set up their own operation, and then they export it to the rest of the world. But they just were never able to do that with your crops. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind about, like Mike was saying, I think there's something special about our freedom to think, innovate, be rebellious spirits, think outside the box, and to reward those innovations, right? Through, you know, your hard work should be rewarded. That's our free enterprise system. And those are certain things. If you don't buy into those things, it's really hard to mimic this success. So we always have to protect that secret sauce, which is the American, what I would call the American way.
Completely agree with all that. It would have been great presidential stump speech right there. One thought, I can't speak to the quality of the land in China, but there is this massive campaign to develop arable land wherever it exists underway by the Chinese Communist Party. So in some cases, they're taking condos or luxury resorts and they're redesignating it for agricultural use. You've had people that had reports in a certain Chinese province of a guy who had a daffodil farm that was bulldozed overnight. So Xi Jinping, to your point, is trying to develop every piece of arable land he has in China in an effort, in my opinion, to wean. They know they're food insecure, so they don't want to be food insecure. And particularly if he's preparing for a potential showdown with the West over Taiwan, he needs to reduce that insecurity before it's too late. Again, I don't know anything about the quality of the soil and the land, but that's happening in China right now.
But that's where American innovation and seed
Right.
can counter.
Yeah.
You know, we have a variety of soil qualities all over, even my district here in Iowa. You know, you have sandier soil when you get up northeast, and it's much different here in Dysart and Tama County than it is in Clayton and Alameda County. So that's where that technology and that innovation is so critical to protect, because that does give us the upper hand, especially as they're trying to change, and they may be too late to do it, but they are certainly going to try. And I think that that should be a kind of a warning shot to all of us about what their long-term intention is. And Raja's right. They don't want to have to be reliant upon us. They want it the other way around.
And it's why the CCP is all over South America and countries like Brazil inking agreements for ag access, as well as in an effort to de-dollarize the global economy too. We're neglecting our own backyard, right? We've become very comfortable with, you know, the legacy of the Monroe Doctrine and complacent as a result. Yes. God's country, we call it.
For your dirt, you said.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we also have some colleagues who are alive during the glacial period, so they can they have special expertise that we could leverage. Yeah. Senator. Mm. Are those Army Corps projects or?
Yes.
And
Yeah. So
bipartisan.
yes, and it was.
It
It was partially funded in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but also through the appropriations process last year. We were able to secure some funding. I worked with Sherry Bustos, who has since retired, but obviously had the district right across the Mississippi River. And what the senator, you know, is referring to, I mean, when you think about our inland waterways and the access that gives us to those markets, right? We can talk about all these programs all we want, but that stuff still has to get from A to B. And making sure that we continue to protect and invest in that is absolutely critical. Mike mentioned what the Chinese are doing around the world. Obviously, they have their Belt and Road Initiative, which we tend to think of in terms of traditional infrastructure, but this is infrastructure that matters as well. So I think it's absolutely important that we talk about not only how we increase the number of places that you can sell your products, but we make sure we protect what it takes to get it there.
They have their Belt and Road. We need our Boat and Road initiative. We need to make sure those boats, those long boats, get down the Mississippi. And I'm thankful that Ashley worked with Sherry and Democrats and Republicans came together on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now we just have to implement it all as quickly as possible. And I was just going to say, this kind of, you know, we're going to be formulating our reports, right? Our economic competitiveness reports. We should be talking about this like as quickly as possible to implement what we've already passed, because upping our own game is part of our competition with China, right? I mean, their infrastructure is like second to none. we can get there if we do it together.
Other thoughts?
Representative Christopher Martin, you mentioned what I would ask.
Call me
of-
Raja.
Raja, thank you.
He makes me call him representative.
You asked, what would I ask of a candidate? It would be free trade.
Free trade.
Free trade agreements, because that opens up everything else as being a possibility. When you have free trade, you're moving, cash is flowing, moving back and forth. Well, that produces money that can go into our infrastructure more and more. As Senator Zumba alluded to, our river system needs help. I live 4 miles from the Mississippi. Over 50% of my corn and 100% of my soybeans go down the river for international markets. So it's detrimental that we get a move on. I think it's Lock and Dam 25 is the one that's getting renovated, and that's great, but we need to got to keep moving. It's easier to repair than replace.
Yeah.
So anything we can do to improve would be great.
I'm just curious, what do the presidential candidates say in response when you ask them to do that?
I haven't asked anyone lately.
Because I'm in both of our parties. This is a very complicated discussion now, all of a sudden. And so I'd be curious, like how, people respond, because that's a very real challenge for you.
Well, and you talk about education, right, and how important that is. I mean, that goes for the people who want to run this country too, because not all of them are from Iowa or Illinois or Wisconsin. And, we have a duty, I think. Obviously, here in Iowa, I like to say we pick presidents, which is an important part of the process. But I think it comes down to the true role of educating policymakers, not just in Congress, which we're trying to do. Obviously, we are trying to talk to our colleagues and make sure that we're making informed decisions, but that goes for the executive branch. Not every USDA person in Washington, D.C. who's behind a desk has had a conversation with you about this impact. So that's where this feedback is really, really important and enables us to go back and be, make sure that we're developing policies that are actually going to work for you and work for our country too.
I'd like to see an increase in funding of MAP and foreign market development in the Farm Bill. And the other thing is with ChemChina and Smithfield, I think when those go through, the Justice Department or whatever, those really need to be scrutinized harder now. Because while the corn theft happened, now they're buying it and it's being allowed. And, they used to buy our soybeans and now they own the hogs. I mean,
That's right.
there's a change in market there, and the government's the one that goes through those, not the farmers.
Interesting.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
Like we've said a million times, our land is our biggest resource right now. And they're buying it kind of secretively through real estate trusts or shell companies or what ways I don't understand, but it's happening. It needs to be stopped.
What about access to the technology that we're surrounded by these amazing machines? And Suzanne, you talked a little bit about, wanting to make sure that you can pass this on to the next generation. How do you think innovation in the technology space is helping us to maintain our competitive advantage in the global ag arena, so to speak?
I think just mostly through efficiency. We've got infrastructure. We've got the equipment available. We've got knowledge, competitive. We've got a lot of, most people don't understand the combines almost drive themselves. It's really a lot more high tech than people realize.
Are there barriers to access? I mean, do you find there are barriers to some farmers to access that technology? Is it cost? Supply chain? I mean, because we've heard a lot about that in the past few years as well.
It was very expensive. I think that's the biggest barrier to the next generation in agriculture is the extreme cost to be in production ag. I mean, the first number is a very big one on this combine, and I probably couldn't get it right. It's more than a house.
Right.
Yeah. And that's not all that you need. You need the planter and the tractor and
Yeah.
the shed and
So from a competitive standpoint, though, so this is where being competitive with China, this is an important conversation because they don't have any barriers to giving that money away, right? They're just going to, as a government, invest those dollars where they need to be competitive. Whereas our system, obviously, rightfully so, it's a system of opportunity, but we have to do everything we can to help support that innovation to drive down the cost. You talk a lot about input costs, right? And we've certainly had a lot of conversations about that over the last few years about, where your margins are and how tight they are. But I think access to precision ag technology could help us be competitive. Is that fair to say?
yes.
Oh, it
More
has
competitive?
made us competitive. Yes, it has. And you also have to take in mind there are fewer people living in rural Iowa. And so this amazing combine makes it easier for fewer people to harvest just as much or more land than they did 20, 30 years ago. So yes, technology is very important to any farm operation. So.
With that, unless there's any saved rounds, why don't we give our amazing panelists a hand?
Yeah.
A round of applause. Great. Thank you. Any final thoughts, Ashley, Raja?
I would just close by saying I think that I trust my farmers to give me the real truth. Thank you for being here today to tell us, how these programs are really going to impact you. Continue that feedback with us, because as we enter into not only the Farm Bill conversations, which hopefully we'll have moving here in the next couple of months, but longer term, when our committee is making these recommendations, we want to make sure, and I echo this, we want to make sure we get it right. Not only does the future of our agriculture industry here in this country depend on it, but clearly other people's futures in other countries depend on access to our products too. So thank you for being here, Raja.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your hospitality, Ashley, and Youngblood Ag. And I want to say, if you look up the definition of Iowa nice in the dictionary, I think those three people kind of would be portrayed there. I don't know how many times, Suzanne, you said the word please in your opening statement. I lost count. That word doesn't show up in Washington, D.C. very often. So it's like a foreign word. But in all seriousness, it's really refreshing to hear people talk about issues from their lived experience, as opposed to kind of speculating or guessing what's out there. I think, just going back to what the three of us have said, I think everybody said it, but not everyone has said it yet, which is what you have in Iowa is special. And people around the world are trying to copy it. Of course, we're focused on the CCP, but I don't think they can ever copy it if we are vigilant about our secrets, our research, and we keep our way of doing business and the way that we operate. Our operating system, if you will. Our operating system is about freedom. It's about free enterprise. It's about making sure every person is productive and educated. And if we can do that better or as well as anyone else in the world, we're going to do just fine. But we can't be anything but vigilant, because we are in a global competition. This is a competition that will determine kind of our standard of living, our children's standard of living for generations. And so the stakes are about as high as they can be. And so I just want to thank our dear leader, Mike Gallagher, and Ashley for convening us. Dear leader kind of sounds like Kim Jong-un a little bit, so I better withdraw that.
Would the gentleman rephrase?
I'm going to take down my words.
Fine.
But our dear chairman, and thank you for bringing us to Iowa.
Well, thank you. What happens if you look up Illinois nice in the dictionary? What? Is there even an entry? Or? Well, first of all, I want to say thank you again to Youngblood, our panelists, to Iowa. What a great state. It's amazing and refreshing to be here. By the way, we drafted an Iowa boy, Packers. We got Lucas Van Ness, the Van Ness Monster. I'm trying to popularize that nickname. We'll see how he does. Ashley, you're an incredible representative for this area and just an incredible member of the committee, and so it's really great to be here in your home area. Raja, thank you for the bipartisan spirit and just the intellectual firepower you bring to all these debates. I think of the many goals we have on this committee, you know, we want to put forward policy recommendations that prevent a war with China in the near term and improve our ability to win this competition for the long term. But I think kind of lurking beneath all of that is this goal of connecting the policy debates that we have in DC just to the lives of average Americans, right? And oftentimes when we talk about China, the discussion can be dominated by people sitting in think tanks in DC or, you know, in executive branch office building or in the halls of Congress, but that's not really where the center of gravity of the competition is. And I would submit that's not where the wellspring of wisdom is in this country. It's right here in the Midwest. It's why it's important we do events like this. And while the people on the left and the West and the East Coast could, you know, call this flyover country, I tend to think it's the source of American strength, or at least here's where people still have common sense and decent values. So thank you, Iowa, for having us. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. Thank you. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. This is great.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? Oh, fantastic.
That was
Oh.